The world can feel like a heavy place, can't it? Imagine waking up one morning to find your life turned upside down. Every plan you had shattered in an instant. That's where our story begins. With a man named Elias, standing at the edge of his world, wondering if hope is just a word people throw around to feel better. Elias lived in a small coastal town called Haven's End, where the air always carried the sharp tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls. His tiny apartment sat above a bakery, and every dawn the warm scent of fresh bread would drift through his cracked window, mixing with the briny breeze. At 32, Elias was a carpenter, his hands calloused from years of shaping wood into tables, chairs, and dreams for others. His own dreams, though, they'd been packed away long ago, tucked into a box in his heart labeled someday. He was a quiet man, kind but guarded, with eyes that held stories he'd never tell. His life was steady, predictable, until the day the letter arrived. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the leaves crunched underfoot and the sky was a piercing blue. Elias found the envelope slipped under his door. No stamp, just his name scrawled in shaky handwriting. Inside was a notice from the bank. His landlord had defaulted, the building was being foreclosed, and Elias had 30 days to vacate. His home, his workshop downstairs, his entire world, gone. Can you imagine that feeling? The floor dropping out from under you, the walls you thought were solid crumbling in a heartbeat. Elias stood there, the letter trembling in his hands, the smell of sourdough from the bakery below suddenly turning his stomach. He'd poured everything into this place, every late night sanding wood, every early morning sketching designs. Now it was slipping away and he didn't know how to hold on. For days Elias wandered Haven's End, his boots scuffing the cobblestone streets, the cold sea air stinging his cheeks. The town was small, tight-knit, with colorful storefronts and fishing boats bobbing in the harbor. But as he passed the familiar faces, the grocer who always saved him the best apples, the old widow who waved from her porch, Elias felt like a ghost. He didn't tell anyone about the letter. Shame burned too hot in his chest. He kept working, carving chair legs with a ferocity that left his hands aching, as if he could build his way out of despair. But at night, alone in his apartment, the silence was deafening. He'd sit by the window, staring at the stars over the ocean, wondering if this was it, if this was all his life would ever be. Then came the first act of kindness, so small it almost slipped by unnoticed. It was a foggy morning, the kind where the mist clung to your skin like a second layer. Elias was hauling a half-finished table to his workshop when Mrs. Callahan, the baker downstairs, poked her head out. Her apron was dusted with flour, her gray hair tucked into a messy bun. "Elias, you look like you're carrying the world," she said, her voice soft but firm. Before he could brush her off, she handed him a warm loaf of rosemary bread, wrapped in a cloth. "No charge," she said. "Just eat, you're too skinny." Her smile was like a crack of sunlight through the fog, and for the first time in days, Elias felt his shoulders loosen. He didn't tell her about the letter, but as he bit into the bread later, the herby warmth spreading across his tongue, he felt something shift. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him wonder if he could keep going. The days ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Elias started packing, sorting through years of sketches and tools, each one a reminder of the life he was losing. The town noticed his quietness, the way his usual nods turned into fleeting glances. Whispers started. Haven's End was small, and secrets didn't stay secret long. Elias felt the weight of those whispers, the pity in people's eyes. He wanted to scream that he wasn't broken, that he didn't need fixing. But the truth was, he didn't know what he needed. Then came the midpoint of our story, the moment that changed everything. It was a stormy evening, rain lashing the windows of the local diner where Elias nursed a coffee, the bitter steam curling under his nose. The diner was nearly empty, just the hum of an old jukebox and the clink of dishes in the back. A young woman named Lila slid into the booth across from him. She was new to Haven's End, a painter with wild curls and a smile that felt like it could light up the darkest corners. Elias had seen her around, always carrying a sketchbook, her hands stained with charcoal. "You're Elias, right?" she said, her voice bright but not pushy. He nodded, wary. "I heard about your workshop," she said, leaning forward, "and I think I can help." Elias froze. How did she know? The shame flared again, but Lila's eyes held no pity, only determination. She pulled out her sketchbook and flipped it open to a page filled with drawings. Not of paintings, but of a building. A community workshop, she explained, her words tumbling out like a river. She'd been dreaming of a space where artists and craftsmen could share tools, ideas, a place to create together. "I know you're losing your shop," she said softly, "but what if you didn't have to lose your work?" She slid a folded paper across the table, an address, a time, and a note. "Come see what we can build." Elias stared at the paper, his coffee growing cold. Could this be real? A lifeline, thrown out of nowhere? He didn't trust it, but something, in Lila's voice, the same spark he'd felt in Mrs. Callahan's bread, made him fold the paper into his pocket. The next evening, Elias followed the address to an old warehouse on the edge of town, its windows glowing against the dusk. The air smelled of damp wood and possibility. Inside he found not just Lila, but half of Haven's End. There was Mrs. Callahan, flour still on her hands, and Mr. Torres the grocer with his teenage daughter Mia, who loved to carve. There were fishermen, teachers, even the widow from the porch, all gathered around tables strewn with blueprints and coffee cups. Lila stood at the front, her sketchbook open, explaining her vision. A co-op workshop funded by the town, where Elias could keep building, teaching, creating. "We need you," she said, looking right at him. "Your work holds this town together." Elias's throat tightened. He wanted to run, to hide from the weight of their belief in him. But then Mia, barely 16, stepped forward, holding a small wooden bird she'd carved. "You taught me how to make this," she said, her voice shaking. "If you stop, what happens to people like me?" That was the second act of kindness, not just the co-op, but the way they saw him, not as a failure, but as a cornerstone. Elias felt tears prick his eyes, the kind he hadn't let fall in years. Can you picture it? A room full of people, strangers and friends, building a dream for someone who'd forgotten how to dream for himself. The weeks that followed were a blur of hope and hustle. Elias threw himself into the co-op, hammering nails alongside Lila, sketching plans with Mia, even laughing with Mrs. Callahan as she brought bread for the crew. The warehouse transformed. Sawdust filled the air, the buzz of tools mingling with the crash of waves outside. But doubts crept in. What if the co-op failed? What if he let them down? The night before the grand opening, Elias stood alone in the warehouse, running his hands over a table he'd built, its smooth grain grounding him. He was terrified, but for the first time it wasn't fear of losing. It was fear of hoping too much. The third act of kindness came on opening day. The town showed up, not just to celebrate but to contribute. Mr. Torres donated tools from his store. The fishermen offered lumber from old boats. Even the widow, frail but fierce, handed Elias a small envelope with a check. Her savings, she said, because she believed in him. The warehouse was alive with laughter, music, the clink of glasses raised in toasts. Lila unveiled a sign above the door. Elias's Haven, carved in wood, the letters bold and true. Elias stood there, the sea breeze carrying the scent of pine and promise, and he realized this wasn't just a workshop. It was a home built by kindness, held together by hope. As the sun set over Haven's End, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Elias spoke to the crowd, his voice steady for the first time in months. "I thought I'd lost everything," he said, "but you gave me something better. You gave me a reason to keep going." The crowd cheered, and Elias felt the weight of his fears lift, replaced by a warmth that spread from his chest to his fingertips. He looked out at the faces, Lila's bright grin, Mia's proud nod, Mrs. Callahan's knowing smile, and knew he wasn't alone. Not anymore. Now picture yourself standing where Elias stood. What's the kindness you could give today? Maybe it's a smile, a helping hand, or just listening to someone who feels invisible. Those small acts, they build something bigger than you can imagine. If this story touched you, hit that like button. Drop a comment about a time someone's kindness changed your day, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what's possible when we lift each other up. Oh, and stick around. Next time, we're diving into a tale about a stranger who left a note that changed a city. You won't want to miss it.